In our sleepy town, summers were always lazy and predictable. Nothing much happened around here. People went about their routines, and kids like my sister Lisa and I had to make our own fun. We spent countless days exploring the nearby woods and poking around in old, abandoned houses. The thrill of the unknown kept us going, kept us entertained in a place where excitement was rare. Lisa was my older sister by 2 years, and with that age difference came a sense of invincibility. She was fearless, the kind of girl who'd walk into any dark room without hesitation. I, on the other hand, was always the cautious one. But no matter how many times I hesitated, Lisa would always pull me along, saying things like, "Come on, it's just an empty house," or "What are you afraid of, scaredy cat?" On that particular day, we found an old house on the edge of the forest, one we hadn't seen before. It was tucked behind a thicket of tall grass, almost as if the forest itself was hiding it. The windows were broken, and the paint was peeling off in long, jagged strips. The front door hung slightly open, creaking as it swung back and forth in the breeze. "Let's go in," Lisa whispered, her eyes gleaming with excitement. She didn't wait for my response. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me towards the door. Inside, the silence was oppressive. The air felt thick, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Shadows filled the corners of the rooms, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. As we crept up the creaking staircase to the second floor, I felt an odd chill sweep over me, a cold that seemed to settle deep in my bones. In one of the rooms, an old doll sat slumped in a corner, its face cracked, one eye missing. Its remaining eye seemed to watch us as we moved through the room. Lisa laughed it off and walked closer, crouching down to look at the doll. Just then, a shadow slipped past me. It moved too fast, almost like a trick of the light. I felt the chill deepen, and a shiver ran down my spine. "Did you see that?" I whispered, glancing over at Lisa, hoping she'd felt it too. She looked up at me, grinning. "You're such a chicken. It's just a doll." But something felt wrong, deeply wrong. I wanted to leave, to get out of that house and never look back. Yet Lisa insisted on exploring every corner of the place before we finally headed home. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, haunted by strange dreams I couldn't quite remember upon waking. Every time I drifted off, I heard whispers, faint but persistent, like someone calling my name from far away. The whispers grew louder until they felt like a cold breath against my ear. At around midnight, I finally gave up on sleep and stared out my bedroom window, trying to calm my nerves. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw something, or rather, someone. Standing at the edge of our yard, near the fence, was a man. He wore a black jacket and a wide-brimmed hat, and he stood motionless, as if waiting for something. My heart pounded as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Who would be standing outside our house in the middle of the night? "Lisa," I whispered harshly, hurrying to her room. I shook her awake, my hands trembling. She rolled over and rubbed her eyes. "What is it?" There's someone outside," I stammered, barely able to keep my voice steady. Lisa sat up, frowning. She didn't believe in ghosts or monsters, but even she seemed uneasy. We peered out the window together, but by the time we looked, the man was gone. All that was left was an eerie silence that pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. The next day, Lisa convinced me to go back to the woods, to see if we could find any clues about the mysterious man. Part of me wanted to refuse, but curiosity and the need to protect my sister kept me going. As we ventured deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig made me flinch. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the forest felt, as if it were closing in on us. And then, a voice, a low, chilling whisper, echoed through the trees. "You will not go away." My blood ran cold. I grabbed Lisa's hand, and together we bolted through the forest, desperate to escape. The trees blurred as we ran, branches clawing at our clothes, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. We thought we were safe, but that's when we saw it. The doll from the abandoned house, standing upright on the forest path ahead of us. But this time it wasn't lifeless. It was moving, as if something was inside it, guiding its cracked limbs. Lisa froze, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. In my panic, I wanted to turn and run, to drag Lisa as far away as possible. But she was transfixed by the sight of the doll, unable to move. As the doll took a halting step toward us, I felt an inexplicable chill, the same bone-deep cold I'd felt in the house. And then, something remarkable happened. The doll stopped, and its eyes, empty and cracked, seemed to glow with a faint, eerie light. It raised one hand and pointed to the left, deeper into the woods. Lisa and I exchanged a terrified glance, but there was a strange sense of calm emanating from the doll, as if it was trying to help us. We had no choice but to trust it. So we followed, stepping carefully through the dense underbrush, our hearts racing as we listened to the rustling leaves and creaking branches around us. The doll led us through winding paths, deeper into the forest than we'd ever been before. Occasionally, I'd glance back and catch glimpses of a shadow following us. The man in the black jacket, keeping his distance but never letting us out of his sight. Do you think he's the one who's controlling it? Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. I don't know, I replied, clutching her hand tightly. But I don't think he wants to help us. The doll led us to a small clearing, and for a moment we thought we were safe. But then we heard it, heavy footsteps, moving slowly but deliberately toward us. The man in the black jacket had finally caught up. We turned to face him, our backs to the doll, which still stood as if guarding us. The man's face was hidden in shadow, but his voice cut through the air, low and menacing. You shouldn't have come here, he growled, taking a step forward. Lisa took a defiant step toward him, but I held her back, sensing the danger radiating from him like a dark aura. Stay away from us, I shouted, my voice trembling with fear and anger. The man chuckled, a hollow, chilling sound that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. You think you can escape? He sneered, taking another step forward. You are both marked now. There is no going back. Just as he raised his hand, reaching out as though to seize us, the doll sprang to life. Its cracked face twisted into a grimace, and it lunged between us and the man, standing protectively in front of us. The man recoiled, surprised. For a moment, it looked as if he was genuinely afraid of the doll. The doll's eyes glowed brighter, and in a voice that echoed with a ghostly resonance, it spoke. Run. I will hold him. It was all the encouragement we needed. I grabbed Lisa's hand, and we sprinted toward the path that the doll had shown us earlier. Behind us, we heard the man scream, a sound that reverberated through the trees, filled with anger and frustration. As we ran, the forest seemed to part for us, almost as if the doll's spirit was guiding us. The shadows receded, the darkness lightened, and soon we burst out of the woods, gasping for air, our legs trembling with exhaustion. When we reached the main road, a car happened to be passing by. The driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, pulled over immediately when he saw our pale, frightened faces. We climbed in, trying to explain what had happened, but he only gave us a sympathetic smile and shook his head, as if he'd heard similar stories before. Once we got home, we thought the nightmare was over. But that night, I dreamed of the doll. It stood at the edge of my bed, silent and watchful, its cracked face illuminated by the faint glow of moonlight. And though it didn't speak, I felt an unspoken warning, a reminder that something was still out there, waiting. Lisa and I tried to return to our normal lives, but things were never quite the same. We'd see shadows out of the corners of our eyes, hear faint whispers in quiet moments, and sometimes, late at night, I'd catch a glimpse of a figure in a black jacket, standing at the edge of our yard. No one ever believed our story, but Lisa and I knew the truth. The man in the black jacket, the doll, and the haunted forest. They were all part of a mystery we could never fully understand, a darkness that lingered just beyond the edge of our reality. The shadow had been on our doorstep once, and deep down, we knew it could return at any time. The days following our escape from the forest passed in a strange, unsettling haze. Lisa and I tried our best to return to normalcy, but it was impossible to shake off the memories of that night. The man in the black jacket, the doll that had somehow saved us, and the eerie feeling that we were being watched. I started noticing strange things around our house. Shadows seemed to shift in ways that didn't make sense. At night, when the house was quiet, I'd hear faint whispers, like voices carried on the wind. Lisa would catch me staring out the window or glancing over my shoulder, and she'd roll her eyes, saying I was just being paranoid. But I could see the fear in her eyes, too. She was just better at hiding it. One night, I woke up suddenly, my heart racing. It was around 3 a.m., the hour of darkness, when the world felt the most vulnerable. I sat up, scanning the room, trying to figure out what had disturbed me. That's when I saw it. A faint outline of a shadow standing just outside my window. The figure was still, its head cocked slightly to the side, watching me. My throat went dry, and for a moment, I couldn't move. All I could do was stare back, feeling as though I was trapped in a nightmare. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew the truth. The shadow didn't belong to the man in the black jacket, though. It was something smaller, and in the dim glow of the moonlight, I could almost make out the shape of cracked porcelain. The doll. I wanted to scream, to wake Lisa, but something stopped me. The doll wasn't moving, wasn't trying to harm me. Simply stood there, watching, as if waiting for something. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow faded, leaving me alone with my racing heart and my shaking hands. The next morning, I told Lisa about the doll outside my window. She laughed it off, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. She told me to forget about it, that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me after everything we'd been through. But I knew what I had seen. The doll was watching us. The following week, things only got stranger. Lisa and I tried to keep up with our regular routine, hoping that if we acted like nothing was wrong, the darkness would eventually leave us alone. But the signs were everywhere. One morning, I woke up to find strange symbols drawn on the walls of my room. Faint, almost invisible, as if etched with chalk. They formed a rough circle around my bed, with strange, looping lines and shapes that I didn't recognize. I thought it was some kind of prank, that Lisa had done it to scare me, but when I asked her, she looked genuinely confused. "Why would I do something like that?" she said, crossing her arms defensively. "Besides, that stuff creeps me out as much as it does you." Reluctantly, I believed her. That night, we both went to bed feeling more uneasy than ever, knowing that something or someone had entered our home without us noticing. As the days passed, we started hearing more of the whispers, soft and urgent, like someone was trying to communicate but couldn't find the words. Sometimes, I'd catch glimpses of the symbols again, on the walls or even on the backs of our hands, faint and fleeting, as if they were written in invisible ink. But whenever I tried to show them to Lisa, they'd disappear, leaving only smooth, blank skin. One evening, I felt a sudden, intense pain in my hand. I looked down and gasped. Right there, on the palm of my hand, was a small, dark symbol. A looping, intricate mark that looked exactly like the ones we'd seen on the walls. I showed it to Lisa, and to my shock, she had the same mark on her left wrist. "What is this?" she whispered, her face pale. "What's happening to us?" Neither of us had an answer. But we knew one thing: the mark wasn't just a warning. It was a connection to something far darker, something that wasn't done with us yet. As much as we tried to ignore it, we both knew that the only way to end this nightmare was to go back to where it all started, the abandoned house at the edge of the forest. The thought of returning filled me with dread, but there was a strange pull, like an invisible thread drawing us back. We set off one late afternoon, clutching flashlights and whispering quiet reassurances to each other. The forest was eerily quiet, as if it too was waiting for us. Every step felt heavier, as though the air itself was thick with warning. When we finally reached the house, it looked even worse than I remembered. The broken windows seemed to stare at us like empty eye sockets, and the front door creaked open as if it had been expecting us. We entered cautiously, our flashlights casting long shadows on the decaying walls. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional groan of the old wood beneath our feet. "Let's check upstairs," Lisa whispered, though her voice trembled. We climbed the stairs, our footsteps echoing through the empty halls. And that's when we saw it. The doll was exactly where we had left it, sitting in the corner of the room, its cracked face turned toward us. But this time there was something new. The doll was holding a small, torn piece of paper in its hand. Lisa reached out, hesitating before taking the paper from the doll's grasp. She unfolded it carefully, and we both stared in horror at the words scrawled in a messy, almost desperate handwriting. "Leave this place. He knows you're here." Just then we heard it, a low, rumbling growl, coming from somewhere below us. The floor creaked under the weight of heavy footsteps, and my heart raced as I realized who it was. The man in the black jacket was back, and this time he wasn't alone. The sound of footsteps grew louder, heavy and menacing, echoing up the narrow staircase. Lisa and I exchanged a panicked glance, and without a word we ran. We darted down the hall, our footsteps pounding against the creaking floorboards as we searched for an escape. But every turn led to a dead end. It was as if the house itself was shifting, trapping us, leading us deeper into its dark, twisted corridors. Behind us, the man's footsteps grew closer, relentless, as if he knew every corner and passageway better than we ever could. Finally, we reached a door at the end of the hallway. A small, rickety door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. With a surge of desperation, Lisa yanked it open, and we stumbled into a small, musty room. It was empty except for a dusty mirror leaning against the wall. "We're trapped," I whispered, feeling the walls close in around us. But Lisa, ever resourceful, took a deep breath and reached out to touch the mirror. As her fingers brushed against it, the surface rippled, like water disturbed by a pebble. "It's a doorway," she murmured, looking back at me with wide eyes. Without hesitating, she stepped through, disappearing into the mirror. I followed her, my heart pounding as I plunged into the unknown. On the other side, we found ourselves in a dimly lit room that looked nothing like the abandoned house. It was a strange, otherworldly place, filled with shadows and strange shapes that moved in the corners of my vision. The air was thick, and it felt like we were walking through a nightmare. Just when we thought we were safe, we heard his voice, soft and menacing, echoing through the dark. "You cannot hide. I see you." The man was still following us. Even here, desperate, we searched for a way out, but every path seemed to lead us deeper into the darkness, further away from the world we knew. Just when it felt like all hope was lost, the doll appeared again, its cracked face glowing faintly in the darkness. It raised one hand, motioning for us to follow. We had no choice. We followed the doll through the twisted maze of shadows, each step taking us closer to a faint glimmer of light in the distance. Behind us, the man's footsteps grew fainter, as if the doll's presence was somehow holding him back. Finally, we reached the light, a small, shimmering portal that looked like a tear in the fabric of reality. The doll stopped in front of it, turning to face us. Its eyes, filled with an eerie glow, met mine, and I felt a strange, calming sensation wash over me. "You must never return here," the doll whispered, its voice echoing like a distant memory. "The shadow on your doorstep, it is not gone. But this path, this darkness, leave it behind, or it will consume you." Lisa and I nodded, understanding that this was our final chance. We stepped through the portal, feeling a rush of cold air as the world around us shifted. When we opened our eyes, we were back in the forest, standing under the fading light of the setting sun. The abandoned house was nowhere in sight, as if it had vanished, taking all its horrors with it. We didn't speak as we made our way back home, the weight of the doll's warning heavy on our minds. From that day forward, we never ventured near the forest again. But every now and then, late at night, I catch a glimpse of a shadow on our doorstep, a reminder of the darkness we had escaped, and the mystery that would forever linger just beyond the edge of our world. The shadow was gone, for now, but deep down we both knew it was only a matter of time before it returned.